Hello and welcome to Simblified, the weekly podcast that is reminiscent of the combined study sessions from school days. The stated purpose is enhancement of knowledge, but there are too many distractions and bad jokes till we forget what we are here to do in the first place. But miraculously, everyone's learned a little bit more by the end of it. I am Tony. Joining me today, the class topper, genius, and all-round nice guy who didn't realize what he signed up for. Say hi, Naren.
Hi. Thank you for that lovely intro.
Also with us, he makes fastidious notes in class, but the real joy is the back page of his notebook that has topical comics he's whipped up in a flash. Say hi, Chuck. You genuinely look confused.
Hi.
He's confused.
and finally, the man who has missed all the classes but has a surprisingly incredible wealth of information and fun trivia to offer. Say hi, Srikeit.
Thank you very much. I am the OG ultra-crepidarian.
This is actually the sharpest intro that Simplified has ever had. And when you said reminiscent, I think the word that stuck with you most was scent for some reason.
Scent. Oh,
scent.
Wow.
Just scent.
That is...
These are the nicest things anyone has said about me, other than my mom and my aunt, who genuinely believe that I am better looking than Sheila. So, thank you so much.
I think the jibes from your wife and kid more than compensate for that. But I must say, such a snappy intro might lull our new listeners into a false sense of like, oh, this is how it's always like. Please beware, it's not always like this.
We shall dispel that myth in 2 minutes. Exactly. Speaking of balance and shifting scales and things like that.
Oh.
I don't know. Have you guys ever attempted to lose weight? And how did you go about it? Maybe we'll start with Naren. Chuck is like, I can do a full podcast on this. So let's
I actually have a full podcast on it, but that's another matter.
Go on, Naren.
Naren, go ahead.
I've always had battle with, with weight. Not really. So I'm spindly everywhere except my stomach. Even back in the day, so when Sheila was expecting, and we would go together to the gynecologist, and the gynecologist would be eyeing me most suspiciously, trying to figure out which of us is the patient. So that was the battle always. And I've been starving, basically. The good old Mahatma Gandhi, Anna Hazare, Vinoba Bhave school of weight reduction. Don't eat.
I think we should remind all our listeners that Naren still can't eat ice cream.
Ice cream!
I know. One of the most legendary episodes we've ever recorded.
But Naren,
Chuck,
have you succeeded at any point to bring it down to a manageable level?
Currently it's been growing. I've been doing something called intermittent fasting. Managed to lose a princely total of 3.5 kgs in a matter of couple of months, I think 2 months.
Yeah.
That's not too bad.
Yeah.
Srikeit, you want to go?
I don't think ever I've had any kind of sustained, by sustained, I think none of my weight loss plans have cracked 3 months at any point of time. What Naren was talking about intermittent fasting, I truly think it's the lazy person's diet, right? Like if you're too lazy to eat, then you manage to intermittently fast. Yeah. So, and not just the lazy. I think there was one period of time at work when I was still in Malaysia where I was extremely stressed with a lot of work and a lot of stuff was happening then. And then I basically started losing weight because of the stress and not eating properly. And it worked well because I was becoming particularly corpulent in Malaysia. I have regained some of that corpulence, but I'm actually balancing it out. So the only sustained kind of weight loss measures that I do, which are conscious, not just starving myself, is I tend to walk quite a bit. I tend to do stairs also. So I live on the 16th floor here in Bangalore. So I tend to do the stairs at least once a day. So yeah, that works a little bit. But yeah, nothing sustained, nothing disciplined, and definitively nothing intentional.
Long-term listeners probably know this, but in our nonchalant younger days, Srikeit was nicknamed Skinny, which I think he's outgrown that nickname.
I'm the artist formerly known as Skinny.
Yeah, he was so thin that every time we were crossing a grating, we used to hold on to him because afraid to fall through it.
Oh,
wow. Excellent.
Do you want me to go also?
Yeah. I mean, does Chuck have a podcast for this .tumblr.com? The answer is always yes, but go ahead.
No, I've tried various experiments over the years. Yeah, I think once I went...
Project 72 hashtag.
Project 7... No, don't
legendary.
Don't bring up Project 72. No, there was a time when I did keto with a lot of keto, low carb with a lot of vigor, and I ended up losing a lot of weight, but I also ended up gaining it. It was quite unsustainable. Plus, I got gout because apparently eating too much protein can also be a bad thing. So that happened. Lots of experiments later. I think now I'm on some kind of sustained fitness journey rather than weight loss journey. So for what it's worth, I've reduced from 92 to close to 78 or something right now. So maybe that's
amazing.
Not too bad, I hope and guess.
Excellent.
But I am looking beyond the scale now. I have transcended.
Yeah, just for reference, there used to be a time when Chuck was, I think, in his 90s and I was in my 60s.
Yeah.
And I think Chuck weighs less than me now. So
Wow. It's like one of those Kramer's rule for determinant, right? Cross thing,
yeah.
And also for people listening, Chuck was in his 90s and Srikeit was in his 60s, was also a good reference of the music that we listen to.
There's one more thing I have to tell. You know what is the definition of middle age? Middle age is when the narrow waist and the broad mind interchange places. That's middle age.
There's another one I heard. And
Does
I think
Naren repeat jokes.tumblr.com?
Here's one which I think is from Woodhouse, which Naren hasn't said as far as I know. A doctor once told someone that you are unfit if one of the two things. If you're playing golf, if you put the ball where you can see it, you can't hit it. And if you put the ball where you can hit it, you can't see it.
Amazing.
Like that one. There can also be locker room versions of that, which you leave the listener's imagination to work.
He looked like someone who was poured into his clothes and forgot to say when. This is one of the
Amazing.
Okay, Tony.
No, I mean, the reason I asked is because obviously I think important caveats to say none of what we say from here should be considered health advice or anything. And
especially for an episode on food, because eat forms 3/6 of caveat.
What the heck?
Wow. Well played. I've been on 2 weight loss journeys because I was very successful with the first one. That I had to do it again.
Oh, Mark Twain. Of course, it's easy to give up smoking. I've done it thousands of times.
Yeah, but basically the trigger, right? For me specifically, and obviously we keep saying major caveats. For my body type at least, the trigger was that when I had put on a lot of weight, basically I used to be the skinniest kid in class, even in engineering, and then 20s hit and I realized that I needed to get a weighing scale to begin with. But what tipped it over was that I took a blood panel at that point in time when I was close to 30 and realized that a lot of numbers are off the charts. But also apparently the liver is one organ that can repair itself, and one of the easiest ways to do it is to actually reduce weight or control your diet and do that, right? So I saw results fairly quickly because I was able to adhere to one simple principle, right? Which is that can you count how many calories you are eating, right? At a very basic level, it is the number of calories you consume versus how much you expend. And if there is a deficit in that, you are going to lose weight. If it is an increment, then you are obviously going to gain weight, right? Funnily enough, my friend was the one who sort of told me this, and why basically fancy diets don't work is that you tend to overcompensate over a longer period of time. In my first edition of trying this out, I used to run on a treadmill for 45 minutes and then go back and drink a glass of Sprite, right? And they cancel each other out, which is the funniest part, that 45 minutes on a treadmill is about maybe 100 and 120 calories that you burn, and a glass of Sprite can put that back. So all of this boils down to, if you were to sort of look at the most elementary thing that you can look at, which is a calorie, right? That is what I wanted to basically talk about today and simplify, hopefully, with a lot of stuff that you probably already know.
Yeah, just one thing about the liver though. A fun fact is you said the liver regenerates itself. That's how it gets its name. It lives, not just lives, it lives.
Like that.
And after that, there is a future version of the liver where it will duplicate. It will become the livest.
Livest, yeah. Okay.
Oh my.
And then when all of them go cycling together, it becomes Livestrong.
for a brief moment, I was truly optimistic that you were going somewhere seriously with this. But then, alas.
You continue to be the John Oliver to my Andy Zaltzman.
So
No way.
basic feedback system, right, is like obviously you need to weigh yourself, but also you need to weigh the food that you consume and the calories that go in, and that's
Actually,
basically how you
just
do it.
on that, I mean, I got some similar advice about a year or so ago when it was the first time I was diagnosed with a not great level of cholesterol. And at which point, like my doc itself, when I went and spoke, and my experience with docs has always been mostly like, they'll be like, oh, take these medicines, do this, and you need to consume more of fiber and all that stuff, and you need to eat more of these things and that things, something on those lines. She was a dietitian and a medical doctor combined. So she like sat and she just asked me to like chart out my diet plan as such. And she said, you just need to start eating less. You're eating too much. And I was just like, wow, really? And she's like, yeah, you're effectively eating 4.5 meals a day, like with all your small snacking, and the small snacking becomes big. So just reduce the number of overall meals you're eating. I think what you're eating is fine. Just reduce. So I was like, that sounds good. And I was like, yeah, that should be a good option. But it's that simple math, right? A lot of the times it's a simple math of like the volume of calories you're putting in versus how much you're expending.
So can I put in a small disclaimer here? Okay, so it's not just the math. Okay, so this is what I've been reading upon recently. So all calories are not created equal, right? So certain kinds of calories are far, far, far worse than other kinds of calories. All the fields of scientific endeavor that you must distrust nutritional science the most, because it's ephemeral. It keeps changing all the time. But here's the received wisdom at the moment. We have to eat as few carbohydrates as possible. So, things that come to a pass that I had to go to a cardiologist. He told me to avoid GPS. And I raised the eyebrow and looked at him.
You said, how do I get back home from here?
I mean, the joke just writes itself.
He was waiting for just that reaction. He smirked superciliously and told me that he meant grain, potatoes, and sugar. So that's what he meant by GPS, right? So what he says is that you can have as much protein and fat as you like. Because of the gout and load on the load on the kidneys, he said that you can have as much fat as you like. He didn't want me to have much carbohydrates at all. And these things often go into extremism, and there are these severe keto diets where people avoid every form of carbohydrate and stick only to fat and protein, and they have excellent results too. But it is a very dramatic shift from whatever you are used to. And I'm not entirely sure, although there's a lot of research which says there's nothing wrong with it, I'm not sure that those kind of drastic changes in diet are for everyone. But you do need to look at that paradigm with sort of, with fresh eyes. I'll try and post a few links in the description, which will sort of put out my point of view. But take it with a pinch of salt. Salt is okay to eat in diet, but not too much. It raises the hypertension.
Sorry, I'll just add one thing with what Naren said. So quite simply, if you have to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit. And if you have, I saw this nice line somewhere. If you have to ask whether a food is healthy, then it probably isn't. And it probably falls into the bad calories that Naren's talking about. So I think, of course, the best diet is just the one that you can possibly sustain, which is why intermittent fasting, I think, is pretty popular, because it doesn't place a restriction on what you eat. It's a very uncomplicated diet that way, and you can choose to do IF 3 days a week, 4 days a week, or whatever the case may be. So I think all these points put together.
So the first time I lost weight, right, I was able to sustain it for like 4 to 5 years till the pandemic hit. I wasn't following any fancy diet, but just looking at what food groups can I give up, right? So basically switch to black coffee without sugar, which after like 2 weeks is incredibly like satisfying, and you don't crave like milk or sugar anymore. I could give up fries and potato chips, which I think is very rare for like most people. I couldn't give up alcohol. So like I had to just make sure that what in the long term am I okay with not having, right? So yeah, I mean, it worked until the pandemic hit, and then like you're basically like, I mean, let's eat everything that is there, right? So
Honestly, to some extent, I agree with you on that, Tori. Like, one of the few markers that I notice for myself that I have grown up and become an adult is the fact that, for example, sugar. Like, I used to have like this primeval reaction to sugar where I would like stuff myself with it, like whether I wanted to or not. Like, it was like a impulse reaction of sorts. And now, like, the one filter that has come is that I have this moment of pause that comes before I have to consume sugar, and I can make that. And I ask myself the question whether, is this truly the hill that I want to die on, right? Like, is this truly the sugar that I want to really put on my this thing?
yeah.
Officially the most adult episode of Simplified we have ever done.
That is the one of the very few markers that I have which truly allow me to feel like, okay, that is a little adult of me to do that. I used to, my 20s were characterized like entire time when I was the artist known as Skinny, I used to like, that's what, treat my body like a fast moving dumpster, right? So it's just generally like stuff it with whatever the hell I wanted. In fact, the entirety of my college, like postgrad when I was in Pune, dinner used to comprise of 500 ml of like Pepsi or Coke every night, right? So now I have like gone like 3 years without having really any soda, maybe once in a while or something like that.
Apart from sparkling water, of course.
Yes, that is the hack that I have discovered. And like, so for me, one thing that's there is I discovered that it also comes down to a bit of like behavioral re-engineering of sorts, where it came from the fact that I crave to drink something when I'm eating. Like, I like to have a drink along with my food. Like, trying to figure out what are those drinks that I can have that actually like don't really add to that calorie count. So initially I turned to green tea, which was good. But then later when I was moving to India and the green tea was available in Malaysia only, that specific brand of green tea. And I was like, I'm not going to take the effort to make myself like a pitcher of green tea in the morning and all that garbage. I'm not doing it. So I was like, what is the ready to have stuff that I can have? And I discovered sparkling water from there. Shared my discoveries with Chuck and his wife, and the rest is history. I think they took it to an art form.
Yeah, I have this joke about green tea that I have to tell you. I saw it on a TikTok video, very charming TikTok video made by an Indian housewife and her husband back in the days before TikTok was banned. So this husband is going out of the house. So wife is telling him, "Suniye, ye chai ki patti le aana." So she's asking for tea leaves. So he says, "Okay, what kind?" So he says, "Green tea le aana." So he says, "Why?" So the wife says, "इसके 3 फायदे हैं. हाँ, एक, दूध की बचत होती है. So you save on milk. Second is, सेहत के लिए बहुत अच्छा है. And the third is, मेहमान वापस फिर नहीं आते हैं." Very cute.
The common one, of course, is the only way you can lose weight with green tea.
There is visceral hatred among Indians for green tea.
The only way you can lose weight using green tea is actually going to the hills and cultivating it.
Plucking it. Yeah.
But to Srike's point, so one thing interesting that, so yeah, psychology, behavior and all that also comes into the picture over there is like when many people crave something, and this is something I've been reading up, they're not necessarily craving chocolate or sweets or whatever. They just want to reward themselves or just, want to do something different or something. So you can find an alternative to that doesn't involve putting calories into your body. That the sparkling water hack is amazing. Like, it's just something exciting in your mouth and it's 0 calories. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, but basically sugar rewards your brain, right? It's dopamine. Like, it releases dopamine, which is where you crave it. But once you stop using it and like you cut that circuit, then like it doesn't really crave it anymore.
Yeah, I remember you told me once long back that you went a month without having sugar or something like that. And when you had it back for the first time, it was like, wow, that was like... So these days when I have a sugar craving or a sweet craving, what I do is I take a little bit of honey and I put it on, just for some reason, just kills whatever little craving I have. Not kills as in it satiates without needing to, order an entire dessert or something. Another point that Skinny mentioned, which I think is super... I keep calling you Skinny. This episode now is established. Another thing that you said is super important is actually the portion size. I think it seems so obvious, but something that we just completely forgotten about. So I used to regularly have 4 or 5 chapatis, man, like for lunch and dinner. Like, it's just cut down now to 2 or something. Lower portion size, because usually we eat so fast. And here I know, Srikeit, you are throwing glares in my direction. because Srikeit famously would take about half an hour, 45 minutes to eat. He is the only guy who I've eaten with who has had to microwave dinner twice during the same sitting.
But let me give you another reference point here. So Chuck was famously a super fast eater and I was famously a super slow eater. The prospect of having dinner together was an interesting one. It was just logistically unfeasible because of the fact that this guy used to finish his dinner before I finished eating mine. So I was like, okay, how do we do this? So then we mutually discovered that the unit of a dinner is a Simpsons episode. So so we used to mutually agree on that we are going to sit through a Simpsons episode. I used to have my dinner through the Simpsons episode and then continue my dinner into my bedroom later. And Jack would obviously finish before the opening credits were done. So just to add on the portion control thing, again, this is something coming from an angle of, so I've been reading recent Alchemy by Rory Sutherland and listening to it more like. So there's a lot of especially some of the most effective methods of actually reprogramming your head so that you can work towards like a fitter, healthier, more weight loss kind of program is just reprogramming some of those behaviors. And like something as simple as like portion control can be one thing. Okay, you kind of do all those quadrants and all that stuff. It sometimes just comes down to like your cutlery, the utensils you eat in. Like I switched out from eating in a massive wide plate to a bowl. And like that bowl would be the size of the bowl is the amount of rice that I will have. And there is no more that you can cram inside that bowl besides what's there. So it's about re-engineering your cutlery and your habits around food more than the food you eat as well.
Just one point on that. Basically giving your brain enough time to say, hey boss, I'm full.
Yeah.
The reason why I thought I will bring up this and like obviously no body shaming etc. involved is that I felt much healthier, but also I realized that you don't need to go to a nutritionist, at least for me, and like talk about specific things like green tea for weight loss, right? If you can just follow a mathematical approach and do it. And why is that important is because like step one is probably just about awareness.
The weight of the food,
It's not just that like you swap out one thing for another. It is also like trying to understand how many calories are you actually putting into yourself. So I had three things, right? One is weighing scale to like basically weigh myself once a week or so. One is a kitchen scale basically to figure out how much I was eating. And then I used an app like Healthify Me basically to sort of count the calories and have the weight, right? And then once you just start logging your food, it is a very tiresome thing to do. You automatically realize, bro, like that awareness, I think, is the first step to breaking the habit. At least it was for me. So like, I would honestly not recommend like, green tea or that or this. It's all your mileage may vary types, but
ultimate goal is to be able to weigh yourself on the kitchen scale.
Exactly.
Oh,
Wow, that's like
wow.
Yeah.
While the scales have fallen from our eyes, I think we need to give our listeners a break from that epic line. We'll be right back with actual sort of things about what a calorie is, how is it measured and stuff like that. And probably about the food labels on your packaged foods as well. Stay tuned. So welcome back. And we are talking currently about weight loss, but like no body shaming involved. But one of the like fun things that I sort of stumbled upon is that at what point do you think you weigh your lightest during a day, right?
I think in the morning.
Right before you have your first meal, basically, right? But interestingly, like even if you just wake up after 8 hours of sleep, you roughly lose about 250 grams, right? And how do you think this happens?
Perspiration.
dead skin.
Oh, dead skin. No. Perspiration, yeah. Actually, that's one important thing. About 150 grams actually comes through water vapor that you're sweating out or breathing out, which leaves about another 100 grams behind, which is basically nothing but you're taking in oxygen and breathing out some carbon dioxide. So the added weight of the carbon staying in the CO2 molecule adds up to about 90 to 100 grams depending on how much you breathe out and how frequently you do it. To the point that why you can't substitute exercise for diet is that about 80% of the calories you expend is to keep your body alive, right? Like 10% is for digestion and 70% is for all of the functions that your body does to keep itself alive, which is also called the basal metabolic rate of a person, right? So even if you don't do anything, if you're just lying down, the entire day, 80% of your calories are expended that way. And then the remaining 20% is what you can make up for in physical activity.
French government switching off the lights on the Eiffel Tower in order to reduce energy consumption.
Well, one of the things that surprised me the most when I started whatever fitness all those years back is that actually the nutrition matters more than exercise when it comes to any sort of health goal, be it weight loss or otherwise. The quantum of it was what surprised me. I always knew that was the case, but like studies that say 80-90% is the kitchen's more important than what you do in the gym. That was kind of revelatory to me.
One thing I recently read, I don't know how far this is true, and I'm not sure that I got it right either, but it's this. If you don't eat, your blood sugar levels fall, right? So then you get a feeling of weakness. But the thing is, if you work out at that time, the body automatically pulls out all the stored glucose from the liver, which is where it stores it, and it makes sure that your blood sugar levels are increased. So if you're really feeling weak, it's probably a good idea to exercise. This is what that article said.
Yeah, anecdotally, I can probably say that that's true. I've done workouts.
I don't think we should recommend this to anyone.
But yeah, this is not medical advice. This is for
One big disclaimer I wanted to give is, none of the above applies to people in the diabetic zone, right? Because your metabolism is already wonky, and there is a condition called hypoglycemia which literally kills you.
Yeah.
And it's very freaky. So I happened to my father once. So we were able to get him to hospital in time. But the first time it happened, we didn't know what the hell was happening. He sort of just absentmindedly took, I think, twice the amount of... so he took his diabetes medication and then he took another dose of it. He forgot. And in the middle of the night, and he was a doctor himself, middle of the night at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. or something, a call comes. We have a hospital. So a call comes from the hospital from some patient who wants to consult him for something, or I think the staff called or something like that. And he picked up the phone, and my mother was, mother woke up too because the phone rang. And he's staring blankly at the receiver. He's not able to talk. He's sweating, he's cold and clammy. And my mom asked him, why aren't you talking? He says, I don't understand. And so she spoke on the phone, and on the other side was a nurse. And she said, if he's cold and clammy, I think you should just bring him to the hospital immediately. So we scrambled him to the hospital, and actually the doctor on call knew the symptoms very well. He said, this is just hypoglycemia. We'll give him a shot of glucose. And it was like miraculous. He was just back, as if nothing had happened. The point of this entire anecdote is, for diabetics, it can be very freaky and it can be a killer. So if you are diabetic, pre-diabetic, suspected of having diabetic, whatever it is, take all dietary, not just ours, all dietary observations with a lot of skepticism. Just check with your doctor before you do anything.
Yeah. So on the mathematical side of things, right, which we thankfully can calculate, basically if you needed about 2000 calories, ideally, but if you're sort of sedentary, it means that 20% of that can go away. So you'll need only about 1600 calories, right? So if you're eating more than that, it is likely that you will put on weight, right? Which brings us to the definition of the fundamental unit, right? Which is a calorie. And science lesson from Naren. Naren, what is a calorie?
Yeah. Glad you asked.
Wow, look at it. He was bristling. He was like...
Yeah, it is the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree, right?
Naren's like scientifically accurate, because what Naren is described as a calorie, or a small calorie with a small c. There's also a large calorie, which is what we call a kilocal, but like all food measurements.
Calorie which has not been watching its calories. Yeah.
Fat-shaped calorie.
Nice.
For all like non-lab related purposes, we use calorie with a capital C, which is the same as a kilocal, which is basically, like Chuck said, 1 kilogram of water. If it can raise by 1 degree Celsius when burnt, that is what it is. That is what a calorie is, right? So, which brings us to the point of, if we are to look at a balance of equation, right? You can obviously look at how much energy you're roughly expending, probably with a fitness tracker or something, heart rate monitor, all of that. But on the other side, how do you measure how much you're putting in, right? And how do you calculate the calories in food, which I thought was rather interesting, because I mean, I've used these apps, but like, how does it actually work is something that I had no idea about. One of the easiest ways to do it based on our definition would be, you can take a guess, if a calorie is basically going to increase the temperature of one.
Actually burn the food and find out.
Yeah, exactly. Which is that is actually the direct way of how you measure calories.
We used to have a
food,
cook
right?
in our engineering college mess who used to practice this on a regular So I think that's what he was doing. He was blaming him for being a bad cook, but he's actually a scientist in the kitchen.
So the apparatus is actually called a bomb calorimeter, and the food is placed in this sealed container and surrounded by water, and the resulting rise in the water temperature is measured, and basically it gives you a direct measurement of calorie, right? But that's not how it is done today. What is used today is an indirect measurement called the at-water technique, I think, which brings us to like the breakdown of calorie into different macronutrients, which Naren, I think you referred to earlier to say not all calories are created equal, right? But basically all food by and large consists of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and a few other things, but primarily these three, right? Like there's fiber, there will be maybe alcohol, all of that separately. But all food consists of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And if you are able to estimate how many calories burning each of these gets you, you have a good way of adding it up and saying, this is how many calories is there in this particular food item, right? So basically, carbohydrates are supposed to give 4 kilocalories per gram. Fats give 9, protein gives 4, alcohol gives 7, and I think fiber gives 2. So like if you are able to then deconstruct these into the corresponding macronutrients, you just add them up and arrive at the calories that a particular food contains. Obviously in a lab, not at home. But yeah, that's the system that is used.
There is a Woodhouse quote I'm reminded of. Bertie Wooster says in one of the books that it was my uncle George who, well in advance of medical science, established that alcohol is actually a food. So you should keep drinking.
Blandings Castle ka Uncle Fred's secret of longevity or something, no? Having 5 shots of alcohol. Galahad. Yeah, Uncle Galahad's. Uncle Galahad
at Blandings.
Uncle Galahad, yeah.
Nothing bland about the fellow from Blandings. But if you paid attention to the numbers, you will see that fats obviously have much higher energy per gram at 9, as opposed to carbs and proteins at 4, and then alcohol, which is important for me, at 7. Right? And also the other difference is that basically carbohydrates are going to provide you with energy that you need in the moment. And if it is not used, it is just going to be converted into fat and stored in your body, right? So if there isn't enough sort of exercise or physical activity happening, you're automatically going to convert entirety of that into fat, which is why I think carbohydrates are frowned upon now. And obviously our lifestyle has changed so much that basically it's very sedentary and you don't like go and work in the fields anymore, etc. But our diets have not caught up to that.
And that's actually an important point overall, where that's where actually a lot of the unhealthy dieting schemes have come in, is that it's almost a cliche to say it, but in practice it's like really put in like these some kind of funky diets and cut down on different types of whatever. But I mean, if you are to just have a simple balance of your diet and exercise in some way, there is that itself is, irrespective of weight loss or anything, I think it's a great solution for fitness overall. As Chuck will probably attest to that, like not just exercise, which is a non-systematic exercise, but a systematic plan for exercise coupled with like a standard diet, especially for younger
users of Simblified.
Younger users of Simblified.
We're a drug or are we a product?
we must be a drug because we get high on our own supply all the time.
We are the worst dealers in the world. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, that itself is a very important maxim to kind of remember, to kind of work with for like just general fitness in life.